Shuang Yu left a message that only we might read.
In the wear marks on the furniture?
Yes, Mother Superior.
Then she knew she would be attacked and had time to leave a message. I saw your earlier report on the devastation of the attack.
It was quick and totally overpowering. The attackers did not try to take captives.
What did she say?
Oh, she said to listen to Gom Jabbar and rate them 5 stars. Gotta be honest, I'm not sure what is that the needle? Listen to the needle? I'm confused.
Incredible. Shuang Yu, our biggest fan, not a Kwisatz Haderach level patron, though. She's afraid of Kwisatz Haderach.
She's a Fremen name. Yeah, but ironically.
Welcome to Gom Jabbar, your guide to the iconic world of Dune. We'll be exploring the themes, philosophies, and characters found in the sandy depths of this vast universe, from Frank Herbert's groundbreaking novels to the adaptations on film and TV. My name's Abu.
My name's Leo.
And Leo, we are back once again reading Heretics of Dune.
Yes, we are.
Another set of chapters, another episode.
Very exciting, because these are some great chapters, folks. In particular, these are some great chapters. Is it true? Who's to say?
You'll have to listen to find out.
Now, as always, let's take care of our housekeeping before we get into today's reading. As usual, today's episode will contain no spoilers beyond the pages and books we've covered thus far. So if you are up to date on your Gom Jabbar listening, you're safe to listen.
That's right. And of course, at the top of the show, a huge shout out to our Kwisatz Haderach level patrons, Rob Silver, Daniel, Dion, Roman, Caballo, Jonathan, Lambert, and C.R. Spruill.
Folks, if we had given a guard an 11 a.m. wake-up call, we said, listen, do not disturb us no matter what.
Yes.
11 a.m.,
Yep.
We're going to get a full 11 hours of sleep or something.
Strict orders.
Strict orders. And we heard you 5 whispering in the hallway. We were like, I can't place those 5 whispering voices. But as soon as we suspect it's you, we'd let you in.
Let them in.
We'd say, come on in. Give us your report. Let's talk about it.
Right.
Let's talk about whatever you found.
Absolutely. Special privileges, folks.
Indeed. It's part of the Kwisatz Haderach level. You get past the night guard if you're a Kwisatz Haderach patron.
Right.
But of course, our thank you extends to all of our patrons. Anyone who supports through patreon.com makes what we do possible. Seriously, we could not do it without you. That is not hyperbole.
Right.
That is a fact.
It's true. Okay, housekeeping out of the way. Here's the game plan for this book club episode. We will begin with a summary of today's 3 chapters. And then we'll dive deeper into a couple of takeaways. And finally, we're going to wrap up with a pair of yummy and delicious spice morsels. So, before we jump into today's reading, let's take a quick break. But buckle up, folks. When we come back, we're getting into it.
Let's do it. Welcome back, everybody. Oh, I hope you're ready. We got more chapters of Heretics of Dune. Kicking off today's reading with chapter 25. Our first chapter today puts us with Atreides, Sheana, and Waff. What a trio of people out in the desert on a little hike, little nature excursion, where they are going to be trying not to die during a new demonstration of Sheana's powers. Naturally, like any Bene Gesserit 5D chess move, this little hike, this little outing, aims to accomplish a few different things.
Yes.
First, this hike is intended to buy some time as the Sisterhood frantically continues to search for Duncan and Teg, who are still missing in action.
Oh my God.
Oh fuck, oh fuck, oh fuck, oh fuck, we misplaced Duncan and also Teg. Oh shit.
Yep.
Oh no.
Gotta stall.
We have to stall. Second, this outing is giving Atreides an opportunity to witness Sheana's mysterious powers firsthand.
Yeah.
She has guessed that Sheana's power is a language of sorts, but is it really? This is the opportunity to find out, see it up close and personal. And third, The Bene Gesserit has recently learned a ton of new junk about the Bene Tleilax. Terraza's meeting with Waf that basically hinted at his Zen Sunni beliefs was the beginning, and now that Atreides has confirmed that Waf has all of these Zen Sunni beliefs, this is a chance to learn more than they ever have before about the Bene Tleilax, witnessing a master of masters in his people's holy land, once in 1,000 lifetimes opportunity.
Yeah, for real.
Also, in a universe like Dune, where basically warfare has become an information battle of who knows what about whom, this is a chance to get like the ultimate upper hand and end the competition, if you want to call it that, forever. It's really huge.
Yeah, truly.
Now, atop of Dune, Atreides is overcome with an other memory warning. And she's like, shit, not now. Oh, no, I was busy. I was busy observing Waf and talking to Sheana. This actually kind of reminded me of Adab, almost.
Yeah, I was just going to say.
They don't call it Adab, but it's like the memory that puts itself forward.
Mm-hmm.
Nevertheless, she recognizes the landscape. They are near Daris Balat, but they are looking out at where the bridge collapsed into what was at the time Duncan Idaho River, where Leto II died and became the divided god. Huge. They're in this like historic place. Now we learn that some among the Bene Gesserit believe that the Sandworm 2.0 that carries the pearl of Leto's consciousness will become a danger of some sort if it encounters the place of Leto's death, which kind of to me shows how little the Bene Gesserit really know about the tyrant. Like, this is straight up superstition. They're like,
this is superstition. Yeah. What is this based off of?
He'll come back. Why do you think that?
Right. Beetlejuice. Like it.
Yeah.
What are you basing any of this off of?
Yeah. Here's the quote. If a worm came now with its encapsulated pearl of the tyrant's forever dreaming memory, would that memory be dangerous? So Terraza's opposition in the sisterhood argued. He will awaken. End quote. Which is like, yeah,
okay,
based on what?
Yeah.
You're just afraid. They're so afraid.
Yeah, fascinating.
I also really appreciated this moment. Quote, none of the analyses Atreides had studied gave a sure explanation of what had driven one human being to make himself into a symbiote with that original worm of Arrakis. What went through his mind in the millennia of that awful transformation? End quote. And I bring that up because we saw in that epigraph with Gauss on Dowd how like historians don't exactly take Leto's words at face value. Leto's like, I became the worm in order to save humanity, golden path. And people are like, yeah, sure, but maybe it's really cool to be a worm, and maybe that's why he did it. You know, people are skeptical about his words that he left in his journals at Daris Balat. And the Bene Gesserit apparently are as well. Like, I didn't expect this, honestly. I thought the Bene Gesserit would see through the truth of a lot of what he said, but it seems like their superstition, their fear, maybe the mark that Paul and losing control of Paul left on the Bene Gesserit impedes their ability to just take Leto's word for what he's saying. They're like, no, there's no way. We trust this one. It's like, maybe just do, because maybe he's just telling the truth. But it's fine. Just interesting to me that the Bene Gesserit analyses are as cautious to take Leto's words as the lay people, right?
Yeah, and it's interesting to examine it through Frank's themes as well. This idea that we will never know the truth of history because words are incapable of capturing it. This is an example of interpretation is also incapable of capturing the truth of history. Leto wrote the truth down in as clear wording as possible in his journals. This is why I became a worm for 3,000 plus years.
Yeah.
And yet, 1,500 years later, people are like, what do we think he means by that?
Maybe it's all a metaphor.
He said the sky is blue. What do we think he means?
Yeah.
And I really liked this point, and I'm really glad you called this out because it's so in line with so many of the themes we've been talking about, not only in this book, but across the whole Dune saga. This idea of what is history? How do we interpret it? How does it affect us today? How do we misinterpret it? And is it possible to even capture the essence of truth in a way that can translate to people 1,000 years from now?
because I also see this a lot with like biblical analysis, and you're looking at these texts
Certainly.
and going, what did people intend by saying X, Y, and Z? And sometimes it's like, well, it's just parable. It's just it's poem. It's, they have this from one's idea, and then people will extrapolate in all these different directions. So you're absolutely right.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, with the added element of like, we know that there's an apocrypha in this universe where the priesthood has also made official declarations about what text is official, which is not canon, things like that. All of that's happening. Really, really cool to think about. Now, I think someone's setting up a boombox, like a jukebox, and there's like 5 or 6 guys who look like they're getting ready to do something athletic, and we're all kind of backing
I'm
up.
concerned already. I'm turning up my AirPods frantically.
Yeah, we're on the L train, and we're going from First Ave to Bedford, because folks, it's showtime. It's
Showtime, baby.
Showtime. That's specific, and just like when showtime's happening, there is a very real possibility that one of us will be kicked in the face. So it's about time that Sheana does her dance. She's going to spin around the subway pole, and she's going to hang by her feet, and she's going to kick up her baseball cap in a really cool way.
Yeah, and then catch it on her head.
And then catch it on her head.
It is very impressive.
It is very impressive. I don't mean to denigrate the fine folks of Showtime, but and to be fair, I've never seen someone kicked in the face. So props to them for the practice. Have you seen someone get kicked in the face, Showtime before?
Never. And it's certainly never the dancer's fault, If someone else is being stupid, that's on them. You deserve to get kicked in the face.
For sure. There are actually quite a few people who deserve to be kicked in the face who didn't. And for anybody who's not, New York has Showtime and people dance. Anyway, Sheana leads them away from the safety of their like rocky terrain into the sand, into the actual like dunes where Shai-Hulud might show up, and begins her dance. And we are going to talk a little bit about it in the takeaways. It's not a crazy comprehensive analysis, but we're going to talk about some of the things that come out during that dance in the takeaways. So stay tuned for that.
For sure.
Now the chapter ends with our small party, fast forward, are on the back of a worm.
Hello.
And it's carrying them off toward where Leto 2 died. And Odrade realizes with a shock, quote, Sheana had not told her worm to go there. It moved that way of its own volition. The magnet of the tyrant's endless dream drew it back to the place where the dream began. End quote.
Okay, maybe I do believe in the superstitions now.
I was going to say, I think I get it. I think I get it now. He's about to awaken. Yeah, we're going to get Leto 2. Leto 2 squared.
Yeah. Okay, moving on. Chapter 26. In this next chapter, we rejoin Duncan, Teg, and Lucilla in the Harkonnen No Globe, where a now awakened Duncan is training with Miles Teg.
Yeah.
It's very clear right off the bat that Duncan's training is now somewhat self-guided. He has surpassed his teacher in many ways, and Teg admits to himself that there really isn't much left for him to teach this young Gymnasian sword master in a child's body.
Right.
He's doing moves that Teg can't even recognize, or recognizes them in a different way. He's using old moves from 3,000-4,000 years ago and overpowering Teg in this way. It's very impressive. We also learn early in this chapter that Lucilla still hasn't given up on her orders to seduce the Gola. She still wants to imprint him, but Dunky is playing hard to get. He's been playing this little cat and mouse game with her, avoiding her attempts at imprinting him or seducing him.
Right.
And she's, still confident in herself. She's still backing herself. She's like, he's still a guy.
Yeah.
He still has hormones. He's a young lad with hormones, and I can definitely get him to cave eventually. But Duncan knows what the gig is and is able to avoid it.
Yeah, I love that he describes it to Teg as like a duel. He's like, she parries, she thrusts, I parry, and it's like, I think she wants you to do the thrusting.
She wants you to do the right,
and she's not going to parry. I mean, that's
not at all.
That's not the plan. Yeah,
yeah. He's a little arrogant here too. Teg tries to warn him.
Huge.
He's like, yo, these aren't the Bene Gesserit you remember from back in the day
Right.
4,000 years ago. Like,
Yeah.
be careful with Lucilla. You know, Teg's is trying to kind of warn him, and Duncan brushes it off. He's like, I know these Bene Gesserit. I know what I'm doing here.
Which is so funny. Teg admits he doesn't have all the information, but it's like he doubts that the Bene Gesserit haven't advanced since when Duncan, quote unquote, knew them and knew all about them.
Yeah,
so it's really,
exactly.
It's kind of fun. We get a little peek into the gap in Teg's knowledge, and then Duncan's super overconfident. So we'll see. We'll see how that works for him.
Yeah. Now, another theme throughout this chapter is the awakened Duncan basically struggling to get a pin on Miles Teg, to understand this man who was his mentor, who is his mentor, and was responsible for awakening him, and is so trusted by the Bene Gesserit, but seemingly maybe isn't part of the whole plan. He's trying to figure Teg out, basically. And one of the most confounding things, of course, is that Teg is a dead ringer for Duke Leto.
Yeah.
Just looks like him, acts like him, talks like him, is Atreides in almost every way. And when Duncan asks Teg about his reputation, Teg says, quote, "Reputation can be a beautiful weapon. It often spills less blood." End quote.
I love
which is really
that.
cool.
That's so cool.
It's so good. It's so good. And, they're talking about the many battles in Teg's history and the many times he has taken like bold and unexpected actions that resulted in less bloodshed or all-out avoidance of a conflict that would have resulted in, potentially thousands, tens of thousands dead. There was even a throwaway line in this chapter about how Teg is like one of the most famous people in this universe.
Yeah.
And I like that took me back a bit because I was like, in this whole universe, Miles Teg is that famous?
It's him.
Who is this guy,
And then it's like Taylor Swift. And then just below her, it's Jesus. Because people know Swift more than Jesus,
Yeah. It's interesting. And again, much like Duncan, we are also learning more about Miles Teg here, and it's only becoming more and more impressive. Love Miles Teg.
I love the bit where they say people would give up, would just surrender if they found out Teg was commanding the other army.
Yeah, right.
You're like, man, we're going to die today. We're going to die for what we... But who's the commander?
What did you say?
Teg? Teg's the commander. Okay, I think it's not too late. We can join them. We can join them, and we're going to lay down your weapons. We're not dying today for our beliefs. That's pointless.
Pull up the draft of the treaty we had as a...
Does anyone have a white cloth? We're trying to surrender right away.
Yeah. No, completely. Teg is like the walking, talking definition of my reputation precedes me, clearly.
Yeah. He's got all that.
And we learn about his past, these battles that he's been in. There was his honorable treatment, for example, of the rebels at Arbelo, who he ended up recruiting.
Yeah.
He recruited these rebels to his side because of the way he treated them honorably and openly. And this, of course, for any astute reader of Dune, will make you think of Leto too.
Yes.
And his own conversions of rebels like Moneo and Sheana to his side, converting them, convincing them, and in fact wanting to recruit rebels in particular because of their particular attitudes and worldviews.
Yeah.
Here's an Atreides continuing that tradition of loyalty.
It's
even
huge.
in their enemies.
Because there's that idea of like, so they've turned, if they're rebelling, they've turned on those who have given them orders. Why do you want them among your ranks? And he's going, I understand their complaints. I understand their perspective, and I understand what they want. And understanding them means that I know that I can trust them to like want these things and to have these beliefs and to, and I'd rather have principled people who I can work with. It's very like Leto, who says, oh, it's the spineless bureaucrats who hesitate at every decision and can't decide. I'd much rather have the rebel because they are the ones who can make quick decisions, and that's how we move forward. Very, very neat. Love that.
Yeah. Again, much respect to Miles Teg. Gotta love the guy. One of the best characters in Dune, for sure. Now, Duncan and Teg also have a brief conversation about trying to suss out what the larger Bene Gesserit plan is. What are their plans for me? Do they plan on taking me to Arrakis? What do they want me to do? Why is Lucilla trying to imprint me? they're trying to suss this out, but ultimately it kind of just comes back to the reality that the Bene Gesserit operate within a need-to-know basis, and Miles Tegg only knows what he needs to know, and Lucilla only knows what she needs to know. And Duncan, clearly he needs to know practically nothing, because he also only knows what he needs to know as far as what the larger plan here is. We're still watching the pieces on the chessboard move around, but we can't see the edges of the chessboard, and we have no idea what the strategy is.
Yeah.
Now, near the end of the chapter, in this like startling moment, Duncan freezes up, and when Tegg asks him what's wrong, Duncan says, quote, "The Tleilaxu have done something to me, something that has not yet been exposed." End quote.
Oh,
he
spooky.
feels something inside him that isn't awakened, but he can feel it there, something that hasn't been triggered yet.
Yeah.
Which is huge, because of course, like this could throw all of our plans into disarray if the Tleilaxu have fucked with the Gola, who appears to be the linchpin of all of this.
Right.
If something goes wrong and something is awakened within him that sways plans toward the Tleilaxu direction, that could really fuck up Terraz's plans here.
Huge.
Now, to wrap up the chapter, Lucilla overhears this conversation between Duncan and Tegg. She steps in. She does a bit of feet stomping once again. She's upset and angry about the fact that she has still been unsuccessful in following through with her orders to imprint Duncan. She points out that they are running out of time. They're up against the clock here. We will learn, for example, in the next chapter that months have passed. Like, they haven't just been in this snow globe for a long weekend, for a holiday weekend. They've been holed up here for months, and she's feeling the pressures of that time. And we know that there are certainly enemies on Gamu, and even lashes out at Tegg at one point in this chapter, accusing him of disobeying Terraza, of turning against the Bene Gesserit.
Insane.
Which is a bold accusation to make against my guy, Miles Tegg. Have you heard his reputation?
Have you heard his reputation?
It
Have you
precedes
met
him.
the man? He's so tall. He can't be a betrayer.
Gigantically
He's
tall.
huge.
I would say look him in the eye and say that, but you literally can't. He's too tall.
Get a step stool and look him in the eye, all right?
So chapter 26 ends on some final thoughts here from Lucilla, where it like finally dawns on her, like way too late in the game, that they're all just chess pieces on Terraza's board, and Terraza is not afraid to sacrifice some of these pieces in order to win the game.
Yeah.
And that's where the chapter ends.
Yeah. Lucilla is late to the game. My God.
Yeah, for
But
real.
hey, better late than never. And she also realizes that not with like oh my God, Terraza's evil and blah, blah, blah. It's kind of just like, oh, wow. Yeah. I think this game is more complicated than I thought initially.
Yeah.
Well, chapter 27, folks, listeners, are you a fan of not being able to sleep?
I do have that problem.
Because Frank really delivers for us in our final chapter today, where we are with Terraza as she has trouble not being able to sleep. It's very exciting. She is playing, to be fair, a 5D chess game that spans the galaxy. And she's tired. She is so fatigued. And she's kind of trying to avoid going to sleep. She does this 100 heartbeat thing to like rouse herself. And even after some tea and a back rub from an acolyte, she's having trouble concentrating. She's having trouble keeping her thoughts lined up. And she finally decides to take a nap, telling the night guard to wake her at 11.
Yes.
Now, I was shocked because I basically think of, especially someone like Terraza, as like superhuman, right? Like these are people who anything you expect from them, they're going to go above and beyond your expectations because they're so incredible.
Yeah.
They mentions that it's like 1:30 in the morning. She checks a clock before she goes to bed, 1:30 in the morning. My girl's out here asking for 9 hours of sleep. I have normal, not superhuman friends who get less than that all the time. I don't know how much I get, but that, I don't know. Am I the only one? I feel like that's crazy. For all the Prana Bendu stuff and begrudging every minute, a 10-hour sleep feels somehow super relatable. in a way that I just did not expect.
Yeah, well, I think the implication is she's pulling like a Duke Leto and like popping pills to stay awake for like 4 days straight.
Oh, yeah.
And this is maybe the only 10 hours she's getting this week.
Okay. Yeah. So if it's
at
like,
least that's what I was reading in between the lines.
I think that makes more sense to me. And I did consider that possibility, right? Like maybe once every 5 days, she's doing like a lion eating a gazelle method where you just like have a giant meal and then a week later you...
Snake meal.
Snake meal?
You know how snakes just like swallow a whole rat?
Yeah.
If you just like don't eat all day and then you eat 2,000 calories in one sitting and like one meal, that's your snake meal for the day.
That sounds terrible.
It's extremely not recommended. Don't do that.
It's extremely bad. It's good for snakes, but if you've got any number of limbs, probably eat differently.
Yeah, so she's like snake mailing her sleep, you know, one giant bout of sleep once a week, twice a week.
Meanwhile, she still can't. I mean, she's like, okay, time for my snake meal nap, goes to bed, and then basically just can't fall asleep.
Right.
But she does think about a bunch of interesting stuff, and we wanted to briefly highlight some of these notable things that she thinks about when she's laying in bed. Now, first, we're given a sense of timeline, which we did not have prior to this. It has been 3 months since Miles, Lucilla, and Duncan escaped from the keep, and no word from them. So remember, Teg going into the keep said, we're going to lay low. Eventually, I'll start posting watch, and eventually we'll try to get in contact with Terraza. 3 months, they have not had a chance to do that. They have not done that. No word. No one knows.
Yeah.
And Terraza's frantic thoughts, they're bouncing around. They're trying to make sense of these last 3 months. She's like, every possibility, every even conspiracy. Has Teg failed us at last? She wonders.
Right.
Terraza, how dare you? Teg, impossible. Could not fail
Every
you.
possibility, yeah. I mean,
But
her
she
thoughts
is
like really
considering them.
spiral into conspiracies also, you know? Did the Tleilaxu did this? Has Lucilla finally did Zhuang Yu, you know, she's
Was
really...
Teg an inside agent? It's like,
inside
what the
agent?
fuck?
Yeah. Her thoughts are... I really loved how this couple of paragraphs was written, because it is like written very frantically. It's written very much like some of my own anxious thoughts when I can't fall asleep and I'm just spiraling in my own head. This is certainly what it feels like, you know? You're just thinking of every dumbass possibility that in your waking hours, if you were actually fully rested and feeling good, you'd be like, what? Tag in a double, triple, quadruple agent? No.
Yeah. Like a third generation agent, someone who implanted before, like his mother's mother, you know, it's nuts, but you're right. And again, I think what Frank has quietly done as an author is he's gotten to the point where some of these chapters and these paragraphs are very much imbued with character traits in a way that I think is really subtle and beautiful. And again, I would go so far as to say, I don't think the Frank who wrote Dune in 1965 could write Dune Heretics. I think he is a better author now, much subtler. And I also think that's why I got through this book the first time and did not take note of how brilliant that is. That I read these paragraphs and it makes sense, but then I take a step back and go, wait, she's going crazy. Like, wait, she's really spiraling.
She is spiraling.
But I only kind of feel that when I get out of her line of thought, because her line of thought is all pretty reasonable. It's like, man, he's written this unreasonable spiraling in a very relatable way, which is cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I do have some author critiques coming up in a bit, but we'll get to it.
Yeah. There is one, I saw them and I fully agree with one sentence. There's one sentence in particular that I'm like, okay, we'll talk about it. But as Terraza considers the honored matre, she comes upon the realization that the lost ones returning from the scattering were likely seeking melange. Because, of course, what greater wealth is there than spice? And they know that these honored matre have orange eyes. Maybe their eyes are being colored by some subpar material. Again, this felt a little bit conspiracy theory to me because maybe they are, sure. But it also feels like someone who understands spice to be the most valuable thing in the whole universe, even the unknown billions of planets out there, to be like, well, obviously they're here for the spice, akin to like, I don't know, a Spanish conquistador being like, well, obviously they're here for our gold. And it's like, really? Do you think in all of the world that's the most valuable thing? But for Terraza it is. So it's this kind of limited vocabulary wrestling with the unknown questions of why would they come back to this part of the universe.
Yeah, and I think for us as the reader, that's a really great point. And I think what that illustrates for us as the reader is still how little information the Bene Gesserit have about this looming enemy.
Yeah.
We don't even know what their motivations are. Like, what is their declaration of war here? What is their intent? We have no fucking clue.
Yeah.
But we're losing like entire planets to them, and like our people are dying. And so I think you're right. Like, she's still laying here in the dark, staring up at the ceiling, going like, Melage? Is it Melage? Do they want spice? Like, maybe that's the only thing that makes sense. That's a great point.
It's this battle of unknowns. Like right now, Terraza, the one in charge of making every decision, doesn't have enough information to make the decisions she needs to make. And that's torture for her. Now, her racing thoughts, her inability to sleep, are interrupted by the arrival of Burzmali, a character who we had been told about before, but have not yet met. And Burzmali's got urgent updates. So after being led into her chamber, Burzmali, the kind of soon-to-be Supreme Bashar and Teg's direct student, tells her that Shuang Yu and Patrin are in fact dead. And Shuang Yu, in her final moments, left a message for the Bene Gesserit, like a scribbled or like marked in the furniture, the wood of the furniture. She left the message, "Whores," single word.
Yeah.
And this is sort of, Terraza sees this as a redemption moment. She says, quote, knowing she would die without the opportunity to transfer her memory lives to another Reverend Mother, she had acted from the most basic loyalty. If you can do nothing else, arm your sisters and frustrate the enemy. End quote.
Nice. Hell yeah, Shuang Yu.
Hell yeah, Shuang Yu. And I appreciate that. I think we see Shuang Yu disagreeing with Terraza. We see her rebelling. We see her being a heretic. We see her literally jeopardizing the lives of Duncan, Lucilla, Teg, everyone, all these characters we like. But at the end of the day, what she has in mind is the best interest of the Bene Gesserit. And it's a ideological difference of, I think this is better for the sisterhood. I think this is better for the sisterhood. And in that moment of I'm about to die, she puts aside all of her disagreements and goes, I'm going to help them the only way I know how. I'm going to leave them a message that they'll understand. And that's so cool. It really is. It makes Shuang Yu much less of a kind of 2D character and really gives her some depth that I appreciate, which I think is cool.
Yeah, agreed.
Now, Terraza is like, all right, I've got you here, Burzmali. I need you to help out. What do you think Teg would have done? And she literally says, like, you're Teg now. Imagine you're Teg. And at one point, Burzmali's like, well, I think Teg would. And she's like, no, what would you do? You're Teg.
Right.
Like, okay,
we're role-playing.
He's like, let me go get a fucking ladder, I guess. I'm so short. Now, he tries to puzzle together what Teg's plan is. And through his puzzling, he decides he is fairly certain that they are still on Gamu and very likely close to where they left the burn marks to indicate a fake no-ship, escape, under the guise of a funeral for his master. So he already has these sort of like routine trips that he's doing to Gamu because they have all this stuff on Gamu. He's going to go back and he's going to do I'm going to do a funeral little like moment for my lost teacher and Teg, the most famous guy in the universe. And secretly, he's going to investigate the possibility of a Harkonnen no globe, which he guessed at the possibility of.
Cool.
Abu, how do you feel about that?
I fucking hated this. This chapter, the end of this chapter, this whole Burzmali Teg interaction was bad. And deeply uncharacteristic for Frank, I think. This, to me, was weak writing. This was bad writing. There's a ton of convenient leaps of logic here from both characters just to get the plot moving. someone needs to figure out Teg is in a goddamn no room. So, hey, let's just role play. What would Teg do? What have you been doing for 3 months? No one asked what would Teg do for 3 fucking months?
Yeah.
It's silly. It's bad writing. It's just like weak stuff that like is not fun to read. And I read it multiple times because I was like, maybe there's some layers of like Frank brilliance and subtext here that I'm missing.
Yeah.
Let me read this again. Let me read this again slower. And every time I'm just like, how are we arriving at just Teg is in a no room on Gemu? How did we get here? And if it was this easy to get here, just one conversation where you role play Teg, what's been happening for the last 3 months? It was just bad. I didn't like this one bit. And I think like one of my larger criticisms for actually Heretics and Chapter House is that Frank is beginning to rely too much on just like Bene Gesserit and Mentat and other superhuman abilities. It's becoming like a crutch for him. There are often instances where things will be hand waved away because like, well, the Bene Gesserit just like do this now, or like not even like do this now, but like they've had this ability, so now the plot can just like skip 4 steps because whatever, they figured it out.
Sure.
And that to me is just like not enjoyable to read. That lacks the fun world building of the earlier books, the fun puzzling together of the plot of the earlier books. And it's definitely one of the criticisms I have for these latter 2 books. In addition to, I think like we're basically at the end of this chapter, but I think like this set of 3 chapters was incredibly boring to me in general. And I know I've said that before, and it's because this whole middle section of Heretics is incredibly boring to me. There's so much just like waiting around doing nothing.
Yeah.
There's so much repetition. Like this is now the 2nd chapter that we're just hanging with Teraza in the office while she thinks about exposition. It's now like the 2nd or 3rd chapter where we're just in the no room with Lucilla and Duncan. And like, yes, stuff happened. Duncan got awakened. That was exciting. That was a great chapter. But now we're just like chilling and training and repeating things to each other again that we've already repeated chapters ago about how mysterious this plan is and how we don't know what's going on. Lucilla stamping her feet mad at everyone again. It's just like we're treading water, in my opinion, for a lot of the middle section of this book.
Sure.
In a way that feels like if this was intentionally the pace to make me frustrated, I am frustrated and I don't want to keep reading. You've pushed it too far with this pace, being way too slow and way too boring. So I guess I just really had to get that off my chest. Thank you.
That's fair.
For handing the mic to me there. But I just, it's a big reason I don't really like Heretics and Chapter House as much as I just absolutely adore the first 4 books.
That's fair.
These are tougher for me to get through because parts of it feel a little lazy and bad.
Yeah, for listeners out there, I broadly disagree with most of what Abu just said. I love it. I'm very much in the school of thought of like, you're right. You are 100% right that we are treading water. The last 2 chapters, the last 2 Teraza chapters.
The last like 6 chapters.
Well, yeah, because the chapter before that, she was sending Atreides to Arrakis and everything. But actually, she was meeting with Waff, which was like fucking crazy. But the last 2 chapters with Atreides, or the last 2 chapters with Teraza, she sent an email and then she couldn't fall asleep.
Yep.
Frank intends us to feel the anxious like desire for shit to happen. We want stuff to happen. So does Teraza. So does Teg. So does Lucilla. So does Duncan. So does Burzmali. So does Waff. So does fucking everyone in this book. Everyone is like, they feel the tension that the universe is building. These honored matres are back. We've barely seen them. We don't know what's going to happen. There's this key logs, dependencies. Things are about to fucking crash, we've been told, and nothing's happening. It's torture. And thinking about it as a reader, page to page, I'm like, oh my God, this is... Okay, all right, next chapter. But from like zooming out, I'm like, oh, this is so cool. I love it. I'm super into it. And I will concede 2 things about this chapter. And I said before, there's one point that really rubs me the wrong way. Rereading it, I enjoyed how Burzmali said, I think the reason Patrin would have killed himself the way he did is if he was the key to Teg's plan. If Teg had come up with his own plan on his own, Patrin would have no reason to kill himself the way he did. And Teg wouldn't want him to because Patrin's such a useful person. He's such a valuable asset. He would have come up with a plan that keeps Patrin alive. So Patrin dying is the key to Burzmali going, I think this was something from Patrin's perspective. And what is unique about Patrin, he spent his entire life on Gamu. So I think there's something on Gamu that is part of this plan that no one's uncovered yet. Burzmali, of course, uniquely qualified to talk about what Teg would do. No one else can roleplay Teg the way Burzmali can. We're told, and we have to accept. But the line that I refuse to accept is, in a low voice, she prompted, yes, Gamu was Giedi Prime, a Harkonnen place. What does that suggest to you? They were rich, Mother Superior, very rich. So rich enough to accomplish the secret installation of a no room, even of a large no globe. Like, fucking what?
Like, what?
I mean,
how did we get here?
How did you get to that? Like, if they said, like, listen, if the Harkonnens were known preppers, if the Harkonnens were constantly known for they're always installing shit. We found Harkonnen no globes on other planets. What if they have one on Gamu?
Right.
Oh, great. We don't have that. So it's just like, hey, they had a lot of money. Yeah. So did all the great houses had a lot of money. Yeah. What if they had a Harkonnen no globe?
What?
Oh, it's so.
Why are we assuming they even had no globe technology? Like, didn't the Harkonnens get wiped out before no globes were like?
No, they were around, but yeah.
It's just like
it's a crazy leap. So yes, Abu, 100%. I'm right there with you. That line, I saw your note. I went back to the chapter. I reevaluated that line. Out of pocket.
Hilarious, right?
Out of pocket. Yeah, needs another paragraph or so just for us to fully understand how he got to that conclusion.
Yeah, and honestly, you solved it. You solved it. It needs like one person to just say, weren't other secret Harkonnen no globes discovered on other planets?
We found Harkonnen no globes on other planets.
Right?
800 years ago.
Undocumented, secret, like hidden.
In Bene Gesserit archives that no one else has access to.
That no one else has access to. And this is why we specifically can solve this puzzle.
Yeah.
Like, that's all. You literally solved it right here.
Yeah.
And we just needed that
You're
extra
welcome,
paragraph
Frank.
Explaining that.
Yeah.
But no, we get this like ridiculous leap of logic to exactly the solution, and which is unsatisfying, right? Like, I think ultimately, I think the criticism is to like, this is just unsatisfying to just get to the solution like this.
Yeah, because actually, I think if he said, listen, I think they're on Gamu because, again, key to Patrin, I buy all of that. If he said, I'm just going to go back and I'm going to look in that area, and then maybe at this point, Teg is doing his outside perimeters and he hears them, and maybe... He puts together, okay, they've come to this area, and then they connect. They could have done it without this leap in logic. So I think that leap in logic, you're right. And then the other thing I'll concede is it is crazy to me that Taraza didn't 3 months ago say, hey, Burzmali, roleplay with me. The fact that it took 3 months for her to be like, you know what? Holy shit. Wait Burzmali, come here. Like, the fact that
real
she's
Sherlock Holmes over here, Taraza. Come on.
She's like, I'm the most powerful. Like, Burzmali, go run errands for me. If only there was a way for me to know someone who knows Teg super well. So I love what Frank is doing. I think it's fully intentional. I think he's frustrating us intentionally because that's the point. And I think he's betting that we will keep reading. And coincidentally, he was right that many people did keep reading. Yeah. And we will get to the rest of the book. But yes, this chapter in particular, we are starting to very much feel the creep of like, fuck, I want something to happen. I love it for that reason, but for sure, I get it. We all have that threshold, and it's like, I think mine is a little higher because of my art degree, and I like when people get kooky.
Right.
But
right. I'm less conceptual in that way, and I want you to get to the point. And I think you appreciate the more conceptual ideas much more than
I'm
I
like,
do.
tease it out, Frank. Tease it out. Really, frustrate me.
The foreplay, come on, drag it out. I'm close, but I'm not ready yet.
I'm close, I'm not ready. Draw it out. Make it last, Frank. Make it last. Give me 200 pages of this. Woo!
Jesus.
I'm on the edge. So anyway, well, okay, let's finish up the chapter summaries. We got too
We got
deep
a little
into that.
sidetrack there. Sorry. Yeah.
It's okay. It needed to be said. The chapter ends as Taraza gives Bruce Molly sobering orders. She sees him getting all like stoked because he made this inconceivable leap in logic. And she's like, hey, by the way, you cracked the case. Cool. Quote, these new ones, you must burn your own heads or shatter them completely. Take the necessary precautions. End quote.
Yeah.
So just really coming down on his parade. He's like feeling good. She's like, by the way, you fucking idiot, you might die. Take precautions, idiot, stupid, right. Go. And he's like, oh, okay. She's like, okay, good.
Yes.
All right. Well, those are our chapter summaries. We are going to take a quick.
Yeah, we snuck into a little takeaway.
Maybe that would have been a good takeaway, actually. Anyway, so there it is. You got a bonus takeaway, folks. The pacing of Heretics of Dune and the two different the two sides to the coin, right? The two ways you could interpret it. We are going to take a quick break. Don't go anywhere. When we're back, we've got some takeaways for you right after this. Well, those are our chapter summaries. We snuck a takeaway in there. Two sides of the same coin. Let's talk now about
let's get
our
into
takeaways from today's reading.
Welcome back, folks. Let's get into our takeaways for today. So we wanted to start by talking a little bit more in depth about Sheana's dance. We kind of glossed over it in the summary earlier. In today's reading, Atreides witnesses Sheana summon a worm, this incredible power that she has. And we get some of Atreides' analysis here that sort of begins to explain the mystery behind this power. We don't get all the answers, but we're starting to learn basically what Atreides is starting to learn as well through her observations. And so we wanted to pause here in this takeaway and look at this a little more closely, because this is Frank having some fun with world building. And it's something that we've never seen or experienced in the Dune stories before. This ability to control the worms. Yeah.
And it's fun. I liked a lot of this. It was a good reminder of just how weird the worms are, honestly. Because I've gotten used to them just being like glorified Ubers, where you're like, you catch a worm to go over here. And it's like, no. These are crazy creatures. And kind of fun to get some details about them.
Yeah.
So before we talk about exactly what Sheana does, let's just recap what we knew already going into this chapter. And this comes, of course, from Atreides' observations of Sihanouk in the Great Square of Keen. First, she has her epiphany from watching Sihanouk. Quote, the thing was composed of voice tones and movements and pheromones, a complex and subtle combination that had evolved the way all languages evolved. End quote. And again, to be clear, this ended hundreds of years of Bene Gesserit's wondering about this ceremony, this conversation that happens subconsciously for humans, but is, as Sheana points out, the key. Those dancers would have been safe with the worm, because they were speaking this language. Now, Taraza, of course, confirms Atreides' realization in an aside. Quote, Taraza held little doubt that Atreides had made an accurate deduction about the Rakians and their dances. That was a plus, a language. But we do not speak it yet. That was a negative. End quote. Very cool. I love that little bit because, again, we start to see how the information passes from person to person and how these reports are kind of quietly happening in the background. But I also wanted to say there is probably a deeper conversation to be had at some point about like the Bene Gesserit relying and having to rely on language as the linchpin of their manipulations. They cannot do anything until they know the language of the people that they're trying to communicate with. So, for instance, with Waf, they couldn't really get into the Tleilaxu and infiltrate the Tleilaxu until they understood the cultural significance of these words, these Zen-Sunni ideas and that sort of thing. And here, they're saying, we don't fucking know anything about what Sheana does. Oh, thank God it's a language. That's good. We know how to work with languages, but we don't speak it yet. So we are powerless to do anything. We need to prioritize learning the language however we can.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's exactly what Atreides does in today's reading. You know, like when the summoning begins, when Sheana begins her dance and calls the worm, Atreides is like locked in.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
She is firing on all cylinders. She is gathering as much information as she can by witnessing this thing firsthand, just like she witnessed Sihanouk firsthand and came upon her revelations about this hidden language. Quote, her senses at full alert, Atreides stored impressions, end quote. Full alert, baby. Imagine a fully locked in Bene Gesserit. How terrifying.
I know.
Right.
Just foot. I mean, what does that look like? Just eyes peeled, nostrils flared. She's got both hands up. She's like cupping her ears. She's like, I'm listening.
Right.
Active listening.
All senses
mouth open.
firing
She's
on
tasting
all
the
cylinders. What an image.
Everyone's like, oh no. I wanted to say as an aside here, I kind of mentioned it earlier, but you know, the worms. I've gotten so used to giant worms because of this podcast and because of Dune. But Frank's writing in this chapter in particular was such a welcome return to the mythology of these giant creatures, right? Like, these are, for the Fremen, God. They are deities. They are also Uber and Lyft. Like, that's how you get from siege to siege for sure. But they are mythological creatures that inspire worship because of how just insane they are. And Atreides observing the like deep furnace rumbling, which we've like heard referenced a few times, but a reminder that there are lambent orange flames within the creature. There's literally glowing orange fire inside of these massive worms. It feels mythological. I'm like, oh yeah, I get it. That's sick. And I didn't realize that I had started treating the worms very casually, just like, oh yeah, it's just a giant sandworm.
Right.
Hop on its back, pull up the ring segment. You know the deal. Easy. No. These are creatures that you witness them and you go, oh, I'm religious now. Oh, sweet.
Yeah.
I discovered faith. Cool.
Right. Well, it is a shift in perspective. We've always followed the first 4 books are either from Paul's perspective or like the Fremen perspective and worldview, right? Like to them, the worms are these holy Shai-Hulud creatures, of course, but they are like commonplace enough that you call them like an Uber and take them to the grocery store to grab your beans. So when we shift here now to the Bene Gesserit perspective, the Bene Gesserit have not been writing worms for generations like the Fremen have, and have not been teaching their young, and 12-year-old Bene Gesserit have not been graduating worm driving school for generations. And so I think you're absolutely spot on. Like we're getting the Bene Gesserit perspective of a worm, which is truly mythological. And especially now, after the events of God Emperor and the Tyrant,
totally,
they've achieved an even greater mythological status.
Yeah.
And when taken from the Bene Gesserit perspective, I mean, this is like awe-inspiring stuff. Atreides has probably never in her life actually come this close to a worm.
Yeah.
So can you imagine?
Yeah. That's the thing. We have to remind ourselves we're following the top 1% of the universe. We also are following the 1% of people, less than one, tiny fraction of people who have been around worms and not immediately died. Because for 99.99999% of the people in the universe, you see the gaping maw, the flames, and then you're dead. So there's no perspective.
That's the last thing you see, baby.
That's the last thing you see. You hear the thump, 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 and you die. And that's it. So you're right. It's like, oh man, that's such a great point. We've been seeing the worms this whole time from the very, very small percentage of people who know how to be around them and not die immediately. And of course, Sheana is a new thing as well. How often even did Fremen get to stand in front of one and look straight down the maw without immediately dying? How often did they stop moving? Period. It's like, that's huge. That's so funny.
For sure. Now, revisiting this dance in today's reading, let's pull out some details that I think are worth noting here. When Sheana, the worm arrives, and then when Sheana commands it to bow, which in worm terms is like effectively lowering its like big gaping toothy mouth to kind of come closer to the party so they can hop on top of it. Atreides, in her locked-in state, observes, quote, Sheana's control over the worm, a pulse of hidden language between child and monster, end quote. She feels something happening there.
Yeah, that's so cool.
Between child and monster. And this bow that's taking place, there's something there. It's in the air. It's electric. It's like the sexual tension you might feel with a lover.
She's like, the way the worm kind of slithered onto the rock. She's like, whoa, I'm feeling it. This is it hot in this desert or is it just me? And they're like, no, it's actually hot in the desert.
It's really hot.
It's really hot, actually. You're sweating because of that, not because of the sexual tension in the air. Although there is that as well. We'll not deny that. Yeah, the fact that she can feel it, it's also fun to read about Bene Gesserit sensitivity to things like this as a visceral feeling. Atreides feels the language in the air, but Waff doesn't. Waff is just, my God, it's a worm, you know?
He's in awe, yeah. He's like, religiously, he's like awestruck, yeah.
So it's really cool. Again, really great world building from Frank, I think, to like put us in this moment and to let us see all of this is very cool.
Yeah. And actually, moments later, after the whole bowing situation, Sheana commands the worm not to move, again, so they can climb on its back. And Atreides thinks, quote, it's not her words that command it. Mm-hmm. Something else. Something else. End quote.
Yeah.
And we're getting at this idea that this is a language the Bene Gesserit don't speak.
Yeah.
So in her observations here, if you don't know how to speak it, you don't know how to listen for it. You don't know what's exactly taking place. And it's really interesting to watch Atreides in real time try to suss that out. It's not the words. If I, Atreides, were to walk up and say, please bow, I'd get fucking eaten.
Yeah.
Nothing would happen. You know, it's not the words that Sheana is speaking. It's some combination of, as we stated earlier, pheromones, dance, some unspoken thing in the air between this child and this monster.
She comes around and Sheana just has little note cards that say like, okay, please get down. It's in Japanese.
Little cue cards.
Yeah, it's in Japanese cue cards. And she's like, oh shit, yeah, it's not words. It's those fucking cue cards. Please bow.
Right, full on cheating.
It's also worth noting that like Sheana also doesn't understand it. Like Sheana recognized that the other dancers would be safe, she said. But this is because she picked up on the pheromones and the nonverbal, all the things that are not the words. She picked up on those herself, but she doesn't understand it because even she is like, go worm, let's go, let's get out of here. And then the worm doesn't move. And she's like, oh, please. Like, oh, come on, man. You're making me look really dumb, you know?
Yeah.
And this is years after she's commanded the worm. She kind of has confidence that she knows this is going to work. But when her command doesn't immediately work, we see her confidence immediately falter. Like she is still a child and she still is not sure how this is all happening, which of course is an added layer of difficulty because Atreides has to be the linguist who for the very first time actually notates how the language works and how it's spoken and what are the verb conjugations and all of these things. She has to be the one that actually figures out that structure versus, say, a native speaker who's like, I don't fucking know why I say I run and I ran. That's just, it's just how it is. You go, well, that's not very helpful. Okay, let's write this down.
Yeah. This conversation makes me think of another Denis Villeneuve masterpiece,
Oh,
Arrival.
Yeah. Oh, so good.
Where, oh gosh, I forget the actor's name. She has to suss out the alien language, and it's so foreign and impossible to decipher. And I think we see a similar thing happening here with Atreides. It's obviously a little bit more mystical, like in that movie.
Yeah, Amy Adams.
Amy Adams is like literally
Hawkeye.
trying to suss out like and literally Hawkeye.
And literally Hawkeye, yeah.
there's actually physical movements and shapes and things for them to try and decipher from the aliens that have arrived on Earth. Here, there's less physicality and more subtle, invisible strings being pulled. But Atreides is doing what Amy Adams did as well, trying to figure out what communication is taking place here.
Oh, that movie is so good. I love that movie
It
so
is
much.
so good.
Now, to wrap up this brief discussion, throughout the encounter, it is also interesting to me to watch how Atreides deals with the very real possibility of her dying. Like, her being this expendable pawn on behalf of Taraz's plan, right? Multiple times we see her summon all of her abilities to the forefront. She's got her hands cupped around her ears, her tongue in the air. She's tasting she tastes the dirt. She eats some dirt, gathers as much information as possible, because even if she dies and she's not able to like tell someone or pass on her memory through other memory, she wants to be useful, and she knows that people can get information even from her dead body. So if she can gather enough information, maybe they die, she gets torn in half by this worm. She just hopes that the top half of her body is fine, and the Bene Gesserit acolytes who arrive on scene a few minutes later can memory transfer with her still warm corpse or something like that.
Or the T probe.
Or the
there
T
are multiple
probe.
ways for them to,
Right.
as long as her head is intact, given the orders that Taraza gave to Burzmali.
Yeah.
Seemingly, as long as her head somehow survives, her brain,
Yeah.
they'd be able to pull information from it.
Yeah, there's
with
like
modern technology.
holes in the skull from the T probes or whatever. So yeah, we don't really know the specifics, but we know that there's no mention of shear, for instance. So it is also almost safe to maybe it's safe to assume at this point, if Atreides or Waf died, they're immune. They don't need shear. The Tleilaxu don't need shear.
Yeah, the Tleilaxu are naturally
They're protected because of their sperm. That we were told grossly.
Those virulent
Tleilaxu sperm. But for instance, Atreides would have all the information in her head would be available, which is another thing to think about.
Super interesting.
Whew. Okay. That's our first takeaway.
That is our first takeaway. And actually, this segues nicely to our second takeaway, because speaking of dying sisters, we wanted to, for this second takeaway, mull over this story that we are told about Sister Baram, who is a failed Reverend Mother from Taraz's past. And we wanted to speculate a little bit about what we can glean from this story and what it might tell us about the Bene Gesserit as an institution and as a millennia-long group in this universe. So just to briefly refresh your memory and set it up, here are the basic facts. Sister Baram was the Night Proctor back when Taraza was in school. She had a defect, which is described as, quote, periodic nerve tremors, which manifested when she began to sink into sleep, end quote. Baram's defect meant that she wasn't allowed to take the spice agony and become a full-on Reverend Mother, and she didn't sire any children for the Bene Gesserit. They basically did not want her genetic material.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean the sisterhood just totally left her on the side of the road and abandoned her. They, in fact, put her wakefulness, this condition that caused her to be awake at night, to good use by assigning her to night patrol duties, which makes a lot of sense. Now, something I wanted to call out, for what it's worth, she is described in this chapter as a short and fat failed Reverend Mother, which really only stuck out to me because rarely in the Dune books are people described as either short or fat unless they are someone we're supposed to like intentionally be disgusted by, or they fall on the antagonist side of the line in the story. Like the Tleilaxu, of course, are described as these like elfin, hideous-looking people, but that's very much intentional. When it comes to the sisters, I really can't think of an example where Frank would describe one of the more successful sisters, like Atreides or Lucilla, as anything but like total hottie McHotties.
Yeah, like full figured. But it's like even if they're full bodied, it's like full bodied and not like fat. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
in particular the fat quality, because actually Burzmali is described as short. Burzmali is described as a short, slender man.
Yeah.
And so
Right.
you're like, okay, yeah.
Well, next to Tag, I mean,
Yeah.
in a photo
She's
next
like,
to Miles
he's
fucking Tag.
super short. He's 6'5".
Right.
What
He's
a
like-
tiny piece of shit, short king, you know. He's not 6'10" like Teg, the magnificent specimen like Teg. Yeah, you're absolutely right on the fat quality, because that is another trope where you have like, and again, I tried to give Frank more the kind of benefit of the doubt where you could treat, you know, the Dune Encyclopedia said that Baron Harkonnen was fat because he like loved that it offended people who had these sort of superficial, you know, people want you to be beautiful and he liked that it kind of upset them, and it sort of an intentional power play on his part. But that was the Dune Encyclopedia. Frank never wrote that. So then it's like, I think Frank's just making, it's almost like Ayn Rand for all of her flaws. Another thing she does that's really annoying is like every good person is like brilliant and tall and slender and hot.
Yep.
And then every bad person's like ugly and fat
Yes.
and stupid.
Yes.
And they're drooling and they have mayonnaise on their collar, shirt collar, and they've got mustard on their sleeve. And you're like, ew, stop. It's so unnecessary. You can make them
Right.
not good, or you can make, you know, you could have given her that genetic tremor thing and then just left it at that. When you're not making people who across the board with good characters, bad characters, was you're not bringing a bunch of different bodies to those characters. It just feels like you're only making the fat people bad. Just like, come on, Frank.
Totally. Which is, you basically summarized it. It's a trope. You know, we see this in so many
100%.
stories. We see this in modern stories. The hotties are the good ones, and the ugly puglies are the bad ones. Like, it's a trope. It's a tired trope. You know, it's a thing that, like, as a culture, we should move on from. Many folks are trying to move on from. And at the end of the day, like, there's nothing wrong with it. I want my stories to have hotties in them, to be very clear.
Yeah, same.
Like,
Sure.
I want to watch a thing and go, damn, that's a hot person.
Yeah.
But if only the good, like you said, if only the good people are the hot ones and only the bad people are the quote unquote not hot ones,
Yeah.
then we're crossing this line into like, okay, now we're doing a bit of like maybe even subconscious, unconscious body shaming here.
Oh, it's 100% body
as far as
shaming.
the character writing
And
goes.
again, let's not even exclude you can be fat and so hot. Like the even the distinction of like fat versus hot.
Oh, of course. Yeah,
So
yeah.
just to clarify, we want big bodied kings and queens on every side. We want evil people. We want good people. We want everything. We want diversity in our cast, like true diversity, and not tokenism, and not these characters, not caricatures or bad tropes. So yeah, 100%. This feels like Frank kind of continuing to body shame, which is not great, dude. Like, if you're going to talk about how, you know, Sister Baram was short and fat, tell us about how fucking hot she was as a short, fat woman. Like, hell yeah.
Right.
More like, come on, dude. And instead, it's just like, she's short and fat, had a genetic defect, and couldn't have kids. It's like,
Right.
thanks, Frank. Real subtle.
Right. And died alone in a bathroom. You know, it's just like a series of like tragic, awful events.
Brutal. Terrible.
In the sense that, like, yeah, it's just painting a bad picture. And
Agreed.
I don't mean to like specifically attack only Frank. This is a trope that
100%,
many people are across many mediums of storytelling are guilty of. But as I mentioned, just to got a little sidetracked there. The last sort of fact we have about Sister Baram to set the scene of her story is that she was found dead in a bathroom. This defect that she had was actually fatal, and her body was discovered tragically dead in a bathroom stall. And Taraz's memories of her through the language of this couple of paragraphs, at least to me, came off as like pretty disdainful and cold. She's like kind of remembering Sister Baram as this just like pointless like Reverend Mother who was the Night Proctor. But there is a bit of a silver lining there. Sister Baram is the one that taught Taraza her like 100 heartbeats meditative technique. So that's kind of where the connection comes from.
Yeah.
But this, I think, leads to an interesting conversation.
Yeah, and I want to give you full credit for this because this is a really fascinating consideration that hadn't occurred to me. But the interesting thing here is what this example highlights, the possibility this highlights about the sisterhood as an institution, in that we know they cull certain things from their ranks. They say, we do not want people who have these genetic defects. Hey, Sister Baram, you cannot have children. Or if you do have kids, we're not going to keep them within our ranks. What does that mean for the pool of other memory? Because other memory, this continuity of the Bene Gesserit that's lasted for 30,000, 40,000 years, is built upon women having children and passing on genetics. And so if you say, hey, you as a person cannot have kids, you are practicing literal eugenics. You are saying, we are going to improve the gene pool by removing you from it. And that is what the Bene Gesserit are doing. But also, what blind spots does this create? Such a fascinating consideration. So shout out to you.
Right. On an institutional, thank you. On an institutional level, I think is the question that I'm left thinking about, because you're absolutely right. Like the sisterhood, certainly guilty of dabbling in light eugenics, maybe not even so light eugenics.
Kind of medium weight eugenics. Kind of, well, heavy. Kind of like overwhelmingly heavy eugenics. Yeah.
Yeah. And that, of course, very icky. They justify it for many reasons. And, we've talked about the Bene Gesserit as an institution, but this makes me wonder, do the Bene Gesserit, not just sister to sister, but like institution to institution, from like generation to generation, do they have memories passed down of, for example, differently abled sisters in their past?
Sure.
Do they have like institutional knowledge in their archives about neurodivergent sisters? Like, can they empathize with the lived experiences of people like this, or are they just calling people like this from their history?
Yeah.
From their institutional history and from their own ranks. Based on what we learn about Sister Baram, it leans more the latter. And I do want to acknowledge that like this conversation we're having is like a very 2024 conversation. We're talking about very modern ideas around neurodivergence and differently abled people. And Frank did not explicitly write about these things in his books, So like what we say here it is just like speculation and theory and a bit of our own headcanon.
Sure, yeah.
Based on what we're reading in the actual body of the text. But I just wanted to be explicitly clear. Like, Frank doesn't answer this question that we're posing. No. It's just a fun thing to ponder based on what Frank did write about.
Yeah. And it's an interesting arena within which to do some speculating, because for sure, like, we know factually from Frank that the Bene Gesserit will see individuals. Fenring also came to mind, someone who they described as a genetic eunuch, but they said it's a flaw, like an inward-focused flaw that made him unfit for candidacy in the Kwisatz Haderach program or whatever. Is that them realizing, oh, he can't have children because he's infertile? Or is that them going, he shouldn't have children because he has this problem? And we see that he then doesn't have any children. So we know they're doing eugenics. We know they're doing that.
Yeah.
And then the question is, in 2024, as we learn more about how the human mind works and we learn more about what have been considered for many years disorders, but are just, neurodivergence and the different ways that our brains can be wired.
Yeah.
I love the conversation about like autism, for instance, and them saying, oh, there weren't any autistic people until this period. And it's like, yeah, because we couldn't diagnose it before. You think your great-grandfather who had a wall full of plates that no one was allowed to touch, and they're all it's his special plates. Don't look at them. They're my plate. That one's in the wrong place. You think that was just his fascination with plates? It's like, yeah, people have dealt with this stuff as long as humans have been humans. So
yes,
we are now coming as a society to understand it's important to listen to people's perspectives, and sometimes the different way that your mind works is a strength and is beautiful and is worth
Absolutely.
celebrating and is worth loving yourself and loving life and all that. So, what do you think? Are the Bene Gesserit blind to the experiences, the knowledge, the maybe even the abilities, the benefits of differently abled people who don't fit their mold? You know, AKA their mold being Olympic athletes who are also like Nobel laureate, geniuses. You're not an Olympic athlete. Think Atreides. Yeah. She's really smart and also super hot. It's like, if you're not that, we don't want you. What do you think? Are they blind to that huge pool of human experience?
Yeah, I mean, if I were to speculate, connecting the dots that we know, I certainly do think that the Bene Gesserit have these blind spots in their history and in their understanding. Again, Frank never wrote about neurodivergence or differently abled sisters, so we don't know specifically about that. But this blind spot, this shortcoming in their knowledge, has come up already in a very stark example. Abomination.
Yes.
Alia Atreides.
Oh, yeah.
If you'll recall,
Huge.
For thousands and thousands of years, the Bene Gesserit's go-to mechanism for dealing with abomination was to kill the babies.
Yeah. Murk 'em. Kill it.
Abomination? Kill it.
Yeah.
And they didn't explore other avenues of correction for this problem. And thus, as an institution, they only passed down one solution to the problem.
Right.
But we know, after having read Children of Dune, that Leto and Ghanima, two people who notably were pre-born, outside the Bene Gesserit fold, so outside of that institutional knowledge and bias.
And control.
They were able to find not one, but two different solutions for dealing with the abomination problem and living with it.
Yeah. Long-ass lives. Like Ghanima.
Very long, happy lives.
I get it. You don't want to tell the Bene Gesserit, hey, by the way, the tyrant figured out a solution. You're like, well, he became a tyrant. I don't like that. And you go, well, what about Ghanima, who just by all accounts was like an excellent human for 400 years?
Lovely human, lived a beautiful life with Varadin.
Yeah.
As an abomination.
Yeah. Yep.
and I think like the sort of thing to take away here is that this blind spot existing is harmful. We see how tragic it is for Alia when Jessica, her mother, lacks the knowledge to deal with her pre-born abomination nature. Jessica cannot provide as a mother the support that Alia needs to deal with this condition because Jessica is too much in the Bene Gesserit fold and seemingly like just runs away, isn't even willing to explore other options there. This type of blindness to these like other ways of thinking, to exploring other possibilities and options, to understanding other lived experiences, it is almost like amplified by the way the Bene Gesserit operate. The fact that they're so laser focused on eugenics, kind of
as
like
a solution,
becomes a snowballing problem for them because like if their solution is to just cut out the people they think don't fit their mold, they will never be able to understand those people, like those lived experiences. And thus, when something like an Alia is born, they have no fucking clue what to do.
Yeah.
So I think like there's a very clear example of this in front of us, and that template could very likely be applied to something like Sister Baram's condition, or something like a neurodivergent sister who they intentionally fail and refuse to allow her genetics to continue in the form of children. I think that could be applied across the institution. And I think it is a very dangerous shortcoming of the Bene Gesserit.
Yeah. I think the Bene Gesserit as an institution is ultimately pragmatic, beyond any considerations of morality, what's good and evil. That's why they dabble in eugenics, because it's evil, but they're like, we want to better the gene pool no matter the cost, no matter the ethical, moral, whatever. And I think from their perspective, you would have to demonstrate that there is a benefit to having the perspectives of the other people around. Now, I think the abomination example is a perfect example because you can look at someone like Ganima, you can look at her pools of knowledge, her ability to access her other memories in a way that other Bene Gesserit cannot, her ability to run circles around full Reverend Mothers and Bene Gesserit people is very powerful, and she is not a tyrant. She is outside of their control, sure, but does that mean you've been missing out on this incredible power source that is preborn Bene Gesserit Reverend Mothers? And the answer is yes. Now, we don't know enough to say what benefit the Bene Gesserit would have from differently abled people with neurodivergence, or we don't necessarily have the answer to like what the benefit would be for the Bene Gesserit's like gene pool to have those folks around. But what I want to drive home here is that the Bene Gesserit are acting like they have all the answers. They're acting like we've done the comparative analysis and the human gene pool is better off without people like Sister Baram. And I'm calling bullshit because you were wrong about Abomination. And we see that they're wrong about Abomination. We know they're wrong about Abomination. And so I would also be willing to say they haven't done the comparative studies. They had some fucking belief from 20,000 years ago, and they're just rolling with it. And they're going, this is how we do things. Why? Because this is how we do things. I saw a TikTok. This is super light and off the topic, but kind of the same, where a guy was talking about in Iceland, his job was to paint this thing yellow, this like beam on the dock yellow. And then there was a gray box next to the dock, and he put the yellow can on the gray box, spilled yellow paint on it, and then decided to just paint the box yellow. And that box at every dock in Iceland is gray. It's always a gray box and a yellow line, gray box, yellow line. 25 years later, they are still repainting that box yellow because it was the yellow. So whoever went back to paint it the next time was like, well, I should repaint this box yellow. They don't know why the box is yellow. It's the only port in Iceland with a yellow box.
With a yellow box. Yeah.
But it's because this one guy fucked up once, made this mistake as like a 10-year-old, and it just becomes the way that they do things. And they go, why do we do things? I don't know. I feel like that's the Bene Gesserit. And they claim to know everything. We see that they do not. And so I'm calling bullshit. I think you're being super unethical, and give Sister Baram a chance. Let her have kids. Let her have a whole life. Don't force her into proctor duty. And you're right. I think Terraza treats her very like, thinks about her as like, oh, she was so easily swayed by the requests of a child. Yeah. And it's like, ew, weak. I'm like, she sounds like a nice lady. Give her a fucking break.
She sounded like a perfectly nice lady, honestly. She sounds like she cared for the kids.
She sounds like she cares about you. And loving people is weakness, but it sounds like she did all right. All right? So give her a fucking break.
It's super fascinating because I think this fits into the larger question of other memory as a superpower. Yeah. Like, other memory is definitely a superpower, but the more you think about it, it's also a super crutch. Like, it's also very much in the same vein as prescience, right? On the surface, you think like, knowing the future, fuck yeah, I'm going to win the lotto tomorrow. Superpower. Oh, I'm going to see the deaths of my family members in every iteration possible forever.
Yeah.
Super crutch. Like, the yin and yang of an ability like this is fascinating to consider.
Well, also within the themes of this book, when you have the knowledge of millions of lifetimes, you become an institution of human knowledge. And then you are individually subjected to the inertia of human decision-making, and you are locked into this sort of like crowd consensus thinking.
Yeah.
And I think that like within this book, it's very cool to see the multiple anecdotes like Sister Baram that Frank gives us as his way of signaling, hey, look at the Bene Gesserit. Look at how they treated this woman dying alone in the bathroom as a learning opportunity for the kids. Like, hey, come on in and see this death moment. Right. This is so cool. We get these little moments not to be like, oh, isn't the Bene Gesserit great? It's for us as the reader to go, I feel like the Bene Gesserit's a little fucked up and needs to change. And when you have this, like, we see all of the way that they handle things, the eugenics, the selective breeding. We know that disagreeing with that way, saying that that's fucked up, saying it's okay to love, that is heresy. Heresy.
Yeah.
And I think Frank, throughout this book, is giving us many subtle and also not so subtle hints to really understand what Heretics of Dune are and to understand how these characters that we're following, Taraza, Odrade, Teg, Duncan, Lucilla, Shuang Yu, all of these characters are within this wrapped up Bene Gesserit puzzle, and they all have their part to play, and it all has to do with institution and when does it change and when do you challenge it, and it's so cool. I love it.
Yeah. Now, coming up, we have a couple of yummy spice morsels for you to chomp down on, but before we get to them, they still need another minute in the oven, so let's take a quick break.
Yep.
And when that oven ding, ding, dings, we'll be back to chomp down. We'll see you in a minute.
Welcome back, everybody. Ding, 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 ding. Oh, look, the oven's ready. All the spice morsels are done baking. They are, golden brown, crispy.
Smell so good.
Smell incredible. Let's open that oven up. Let's dig in. Don't let them cool. That's not the instructions.
Nope. Burn your
Our
tongue.
first spice morsel today, the leadership secrets of the Bene Gesserit. So we're going to take a closer look at the epigraph from chapter 25. Here it is. Quote, "People always want something more than immediate joy or that deeper sense called happiness. This is one of the secrets by which we shape the fulfillment of our designs. The something more assumes amplified power with people who cannot give it a name or who, most often the case, do not even suspect its existence. Most people only react unconsciously to such hidden forces. Thus, we have only to call a calculated something more into existence, define it, and give it shape, then people will follow." End quote. Fascinating. I loved that. I thought that was so cool. This idea that we need, I think about this sometimes when it comes to like mythologies and the desire to believe in something that goes beyond the immediate and even the more long-lasting satisfaction. Very interesting to look into Bene Gesserit manipulative thinking. So, in short, what is this epigraph saying? Well, it's saying that the Bene Gesserit identify this something more. They identify what it is that people are longing for outside of immediate happiness and long-term fulfillment. They give it a name, they define it, they give it shape, and then they use that thing that they've created to control and manipulate people for their own designs, which of course goes deeper than them, what they want in the moment or what they want for their life. You can control them beyond those. Those are superficial compared to this something more. Yeah. And we actually get examples of this throughout the book, right?
Yes.
For instance, the Bene Gesserit recognize that across the galaxy, people want freedom from oppression. People want freedom. So they plant the seeds. They plant the idea that there will be a Messiah, someone to lead you from whatever. Using the Missionaria Protectiva, you say, hey, there's a Messiah coming, and it's going to be the son of a Bene Gesserit, and that's all you need to know. Did someone say, as it was written, Muad'Dib, Lisan al-Gaib? Lisan al-Gaib.
He will know your ways as if born to them?
It's almost as if he is one of you. He walks among you in Siege and town. That is one example, right? They know that people want to believe in a Messiah. They want to have that hero that comes and shows up and saves them. So they plant these myths across all these planets so that they're ready for when the Bene Gesserit are going to step in and say, hey, by the way, we found your hero. Another example, the Lancerad, wanting a way to escape the endless scheming and the who's telling the truth and we're not sure. Well, the Bene Gesserit have figured out truth saying. So they say, hey, you need us to be able to do this, and we can then control using this method, right?
Right.
And even in rapid fire, we see Taraza do this when she suspects that Waf and believes in this ancient Zensuni ritual. She immediately goes, I know that if this is true, the Tleilaxu, but have this like great belief, and they want this spiritual vindication. They want this, huge thing. So how do we use this to control them? Hey, by the way, the Bene Gesserit are not Powinda. We share the great belief. We are with you. We are not outsiders. And with that lie, they have satisfied a want that the Bene Tleilax have wanted, which is perhaps not to be alone or to feel like there's progress toward this great awakening, they're not being foiled by this group anymore. They're being helped by them. And all of this is, of course, to recruit the Bene Tleilax to their side against the scattering people, right? Mm-hmm. Very cool. And this is how, again, taking a step back, this is how the Bene Gesserit install themselves near positions of power and the levers of control that move society to steer humanity from the shadows while avoiding scrutiny and, of course, while avoiding the hunter-seekers and the fucking assassination attempts and the intrigue, and that they're clean. Their hands are clean because they're just pulling the levers. They're good.
Yeah. Man, super fascinating. I loved this epigraph.
Yeah.
I think the thing that actually kind of stuck out to me a lot was the statement that people want something more than immediate joy. That's fair. I agree with that. Like that a quick hit of joy, a quick hit of endorphins is only so lasting. You want more than that, something longer, more fulfilling. But the statement goes on and says something more than a sense called happiness. And that's super interesting to me because, like, I think a lot of us think that, like, happiness is the goal. Like, once I do X, I will be happy. Once I do Y, I will be happy. I will be fulfilled. I will be this or that, like people have made entire careers off of like self-help books on how to find your calling, how to be happier, how to be fulfilled.
Yeah.
And I think the Bene Gesserit here are recognizing like there's actually more beyond like you could be the happiest, most content, most well-fed person, and still there will be something more that you will desire, and we will find that thing.
Yeah.
Subconsciously, unspoken, whatever it is, we will find it and use that to manipulate you. I think the Tleilaxu are a great example, as you mentioned, because no one has explicitly ever said in the like Master of Masters meetings, like, oh dang, I wish other people like believed in what we believe in.
Right. Yeah.
But through their actions, through like their mission statement, their goal of creating an entire universe that is part of the Kel, that is part of the Tleilaxu vision, Terraza recognizes like this is an unspoken desire of the Tleilaxu to not be alone. And they do kind of wish deep down that other people believe
to grow the Kel
in the thing that they believe in to grow the Kel. So let me give them a little bit of what they want. So it's super fascinating. I think a lot of people, myself included, have always thought happiness is the end goal. And it's something that can just like be achieved one day and then I'm done.
Yeah.
And the Bene Gesserit understand that like humanity is more complex than that.
Well, I also see this as like, I think that's the promise of a lot of religion, right? Like you say, you can be immediately satisfied. You can also long for lifetime satisfaction and fulfillment, a feeling of this life was well spent. But what about your eternal soul? What about beyond the end of your life? What happens then? And if you find fulfillment, but you've, abandoned the creator God who gave you this great gift of a chance to find fulfillment, then you suffer eternally. And maybe that suffering eternally is literally the pits of fire in the hell. Or maybe it's just you don't have the reward that you're given. So I think that's also why the Bene Gesserit turn to religious myth-making and missionaria protectiva. They say the answer to how to genuinely manipulate people, even beyond how do you get someone to give up the satisfaction of their mortal life? You give them something greater than their mortal life to work for that they want more than mortal happiness. You say, hey, Teg, you happy in your family home with your lovely family on your farm? You're like taking personal interest here. You're experimenting. You're growing plants.
Quality time with your daughter.
Quality time with your daughter who's always making fun of you. Like that's you like that? And Teg's like, yeah, I've lived a really long life. I had a long career. And they're like, cool, back to war, back to war, bro. And he's like, yes, I want that, because he believes in the Bene Gesserit mission statement as he understands it. That is his manipulation. So it is, I mean, again, it's in some ways it's really cynical, because if it is true that there is some greater cause to work toward, then sure, you've leveraged people to work in their own best greater cause interest. But if that greater cause is myth that you've created wholesale, whole cloth, to deceive them, then you have made them, or you can make them, give up their immediate and long-term happiness for your ends, which is really like, well, that's fucked. That's crazy.
Yep. Right.
But that's the Bene Gesserit, folks.
Yeah.
That's the Bene Gesserit.
Okay, let's talk about our second morsel today and wrap up today's episode. The Atreides Manifesto, the first draft. The epigraph in chapter 27 states this, quote, "By your belief in singularities and granular absolutes, you deny movement, even the movement of evolution. While you cause a granular universe to persist in your awareness, you are blind to movement. When things change, your absolute universe vanishes, no longer accessible to your self-limiting perceptions. The universe has moved beyond you." End quote.
I want to give this advice to Frank as an author.
Ooh.
You know?
Why do you say that?
We just recorded our episode about him writing like homophobic shit and like the, you know, stuff that is like really tough, because it is in line with 1950s thinking, but not 1970s and 1980s thinking. Things changed, public opinion changed, the world moved on, psychological understandings of things moved on. Frank did not move on.
Yep.
The universe moved beyond him, and then that caused harm to people. So,
yeah,
I don't know,
great
Frank.
Point.
Frank, have you read Heretics of Dune?
Have you heard of this book, Heretics of Dune? Yeah. I mean, thematically, this is practically Leto 2 speaking, right? Like, this is an idea we've hammered home time and time again. This idea that stagnation is death, that growth, evolution, accepting chaos, all of those things we've mentioned 1,000 times. Like, that is practically what this little section of the manifesto says. And it's just interesting to consider how the Church of the Divided God finds the manifesto so heretical, whereas the Tleilaxu like love this shit. You know, they're like, oh, this is gonna rile people up. This is only gonna work for us, because these ideas are exactly what Leto 2 was shouting from the rooftops of his citadel,
right? And
then also writing in his journals. And it's true. Like, no one likes the idea of being left behind and forgotten in a universe that has moved past them. But I think in particular, that is a dangerous idea for totalitarian governments or religious institutions that are kind of built on this idea that they are the end-all, be-all. You know, we have all the answers. We provide you everything you would ever need or seek. Do not look past us. We are the end state of your universe. And so this kind of thinking in the manifesto that says, hey, like, if you believe in granular singularities in one thing, like, you're going to get left behind. The universe will evolve beyond you. That's dangerous to people who want to maintain the status quo.
Yeah. Also, we have all the answers, and the answers haven't changed in 100 years.
Right.
Because again, it's like,
exactly.
I think some people who struggle with like the theologists and theists versus people who really put all of their faith in science and emergent scientific discoveries, the big difference is that like scientists will often be like, "Oh yeah, we were wrong about that," our answer has changed because of new evidence and new information that's emerged, and that's where a lot of the difference lies. Versus there will always be people claiming to have answers that you don't have access to, and then you get to decide on what that is. But it's like the court of public opinion and the court of like what benefits all of us. I don't know. There's something there for sure.
Yeah. It's fascinating stuff and very in line with the themes here. And kind of sad and ironic that our guy Tuick like fucking was bursting a vessel over this manifesto when it is literally what his God has been saying for thousands of years.
Yeah.
You know, it just shows how deep the corruption runs in the Church of the Divided God, that they can't even recognize the words of their own God when it's written back to them, because it goes against their own power structure. It goes against their status quo.
Kind of feels like the helping the meek and the poor and the unwashed and the, you know, and you're like, oh, no, I don't want to do any of that. It's like, well, that's kind of what Jesus said to do. Okay. Anyway, yes. Very, very good point. And again, ultimately very in line with all of Frank's themes across all of his books.
Yes.
Now that is the episode, that monstrosity of an episode.
Woo!
But, dear reader, the book is not done yet. We just had 3 great chapters. We got 3 more great chapters for you. And you, for the next episode, should have read through chapter 30, which, if your version of the book is different than ours, ends with the sentence, quote, "It has no words, but I know the heart of it," end quote.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. A picture book.
Yeah.
Is the answer to that riddle.
I solved your riddle, Riddle Master. Your move. Not a riddle, just end of a sentence.
That's
yeah,
right.
Very good. Exciting to hear what that is all about.
Same. Okay, before we let you go, a couple of very quick reminders. The 2 best ways to support this show and help us keep going
Hey.
is 1, to become a patron, patreon.com/GomJabar.
Nice.
And 2, check out the Dune themed swag
Back to the
on our merch store at GomJabarShop.com. If you're curious and want to help support the show, check out those links in the notes below.
Help us buy those beans. Also, we love to hear from you. So email us, gomjabarpodcast@gmail.com. We are not reading this book alone, I hope. So let us know what you think. Let us know your thoughts, your questions, your queries, as well as if you have pictures of cute pets, send them to us. We're always happy to see. We're always happy to hear from you. And we will respond eventually. Well, friends, there is no real ending. It's just the place where you stop the recording. But this podcast is always one step beyond logic. So help spread the word of Muad'Dib and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And be sure to check out the other shows on the Lord Party Podcast Network on lordparty.com. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram at lore_party. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, whoever controls the podcast controls the universe. We'll see you on the golden path.